It is called Tup in Korea, Ta in China. In Vietnam, it's called Tarp. Tat in Laos. In Japan, Satoba. Or also, they have what are called pagodas. I think there's a class here who is studying Japanese history or architecture, is it?
Art history.
Art history? And in Java it's Chandi. Now, in Nepal it's Chaitya. So many words, but we're always talking about the same thing. We're talking about a symmetrical structure that is a symbol of balance, a symbol of unity, symbol of stability and of strength. Can you see well enough? Yes? So if you have questions in between, feel free to raise your hand, but I will also make time for questions at the end. So, in fact, pagodas look a little bit different, and they can also have a secular function, not like stupas who actually only have a religious function. Nevertheless, they are believed to have been or to have developed out of the same thing, yeah, out of Buddhism coming to East Asia. But at that time in China as well as in Japan, there were very skilled craftsmen who had a very high standard of woodwork, carpenters, and so they started using wood in order to develop these monuments and structures. Historically, it's not, there's some disagreement as to how they came about. Some say that they might have developed out of grave sites for warrior heroes or warrior kings, just mounts. Some think that it might have been even more pagan places of worship, which were configured around a central pole. So there's different ideas about that, different concepts. But when we look at the earliest stupas that we can find, then what we do find is that historically it was a simple mound of clay or of mud, or in more dry areas, a simple, I think the word you use is cairn, yes, of rocks placed in a mound, a heap, to cover the relics of the Buddha. Now, these greatly evolved with time, and today we can see features of gateways and fence-like enclosures and so on around stupas, and we will look at different pictures in just a minute. But I want to first mention something here that comes from the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, which is the sutra describing the Buddha's passing and the last moments of his life. And there's a place where Ananda asks the Buddha what they should do with his body once he passes away. And I would like to read you that quote. It says, "So should it be done with the body of a Tathagata," which is someone who is awakened to suchness. That is what the word means, Tathagata. "And at a crossroads, also a stupa should be raised for such a Tathagata, and whoever shall bring to that place garlands or incense or sandal paste, or pay reverence, and whose mind becomes calm there, it will be to his well-being and happiness for a long time." And the Buddha goes on to explain that there are 4 different kinds of people who are worthy to be placed in such a stupa, or to let's say, in whose memory such a stupa should be erected. One is what is called a Tathagata, which is a Buddha. Then there is an Arhat. Many of the Buddha's disciples were Arhat. An Arhat is a Sanskrit word which means the one who has conquered the enemies, someone who has defeated the enemies. But what that means, the enemies here are mental and emotional defilements of the mind, confusion. Someone who has overcome his own confusion is called an Arhat. And also what is called a Pratyeka Buddha, or a universal monarch, a Chakravartin. Now, I don't want to go too much into details concerning these words, but what is meant here is that these stupas are generally built for beings who have a very, very positive mind. And so, as a result of that, just being around such a monument, erected in memory or around the relics of such a being, will have a very strong effect on one's own being and one's own mind, in the sense that the mind will become peaceful, clear, joyful, inspired, and so on. And the Buddha explained, he said, Ananda, why is it so? Because at the thought that this is a stupa of that blessed one, of this fully enlightened one, the hearts of many people will be calmed and made happy, and so calmed and with their minds established in confidence, at the breaking up of the body after death, they will be reborn in peaceful and blissful states of existence. That is why these beings are noted to be worthy of such a building. Now the Buddha wanted his own stupa, or the stupa for his own relics, to be placed at a crossroads of 4 main roads. Why is it so? Because the maximum amount of people could benefit from passing by. This is a stupa in Spain, in Benalmádena. This is a stupa of the Tibetan tradition. Now, in order to later explain in more detail what the different steps of the stupa mean, I'm going to focus on the Tibetan tradition because that is the tradition in which I was educated. And so that's where I know the most about. But nevertheless, I will show you different types of stupa, just to give you a variety of visuals. And the Buddha also showed how he wanted the stupa to be built. And in order to do that, what he did is he took his robe and he folded it until it made a square. And then he took his offering bowl and he turned it upside down and placed it on that square. And he said that is how the stupa should look. And so that is why today in all stupas we find this basic shape of having a square base and a round dome. Yeah? Of course, then in many different variations. After the Buddha was cremated, his relics were divided into 8 parts among different tribes and kingdoms who had come to claim part of the relics because the Buddha had spent time in their distinctive region. And then also members of the Buddha's family came, and there was a young Brahmin man by the name of Drona who had actually divided the ashes, and so he received the urn, and his family, they received the ashes from the fire. So all in all, there were 10 parts in relationship with the cremation of the Buddha, upon which the first stupas were built. Today we don't really know where all these relics from these original 8 stupas are, because in the 3rd century BC, the Emperor Ashoka, the Indian Emperor Ashoka, had these stupas opened and distributed these ashes and relics all across the Indian subcontinent. And so some of them have been found, like for example in the town of Vaishali and others, but many of these from the relics and ashes of these original 8 stupas, still to today we don't know where they all are. This is the stupa that was originally erected at the site where the Buddha was cremated. This is in Kushinagar in India, and it's called the Ramba Stupa. So then you can see very well what I mentioned, that it was just basically a heap or a mound. This is the stupa built today at the same place. You have to excuse, some of the slides are older and not in high quality, but they will be replaced soon, but bear with me with these for the time being. This is the stupa today that commemorates that site. This is a stupa in Vaishali, where in 1958 actually they found the original ashes of the Buddha.